Welcome back to Natural AF. I'm Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And it is a hot one down under.
It is officially summer down here.
Yeah, got my iced mate day whatever. And but yeah, so this episode fits exactly with the name of the show, Natural AF. The show is all about natural boobies.
Today's episode is all about natural boobies, not the whole podcast, just to clarify.
Right.
So I'm going to share my experience with getting really sick from breast implants and then explanting. So I just had my implants removed in July of this year. And yeah, I'm just going to share a bit of my journey because when I realized that my implants were making me sick, a lot of the research I did was actually listening to other women's stories. So lots and lots and lots of stories. And then I obviously looked into, the reasons behind, the physiological reasons behind why they were making me sick as well. I did listen to some doctors, but unfortunately it is a minority of doctors that recognize that this is an issue with breast implants.
I think it's a minority of people. There's so many people that we speak to about this and they're like, oh, you've had them out. Like it's a surprise that you would do that.
Kind of. But to be honest, I was actually more surprised at the amount of people that when I told them, they either knew someone that had taken them out because they were making them sick or knew someone that had them in and was really sick and thought it might be their breast implants. So
it is getting more common though. Yeah. I am running into people that have had similar stories that have told me that their partner is thinking about having them removed, which is a great time for this episode to come out because it's really important. And Lex will get into this, how you get them removed. It's very critical to get that right.
Yeah. And I think too, like for us, I think it's probably the circles that we run in and the kind of people that we know and that we tend to talk to a lot, like when we're at the markets. I think for people that are very health-based and especially more holistically health-minded, I think it's probably more common in our circles that people are now removing them. Because even without them making you sick or without knowing the extent of how they can interrupt your body's normal functioning, I think just, and even I came to this, like when we first met, I wasn't, or as far as I was aware at that time, they weren't making me ill. I look back now and they were. But I even had come to a point where I was like, I'm definitely not, because they tell you you've got to replace them every 10 to 15 years or whatever. I was never going to replace them. I was going to take them out because even just on a fundamental level, I didn't want foreign objects in my body. But then obviously I ended up getting really unwell. So I think it's more common, in sort of the circles that we run in. However, I think in the mainstream, this is not something that is talked about. And it is becoming more popular, I think, because of the proliferation of, definitely because of podcasts and things like that. I listened to a ton of podcasts when I was doing my research. And now that there are more platforms for people to share their stories and for doctors to be able to share what they're doing, it is getting out there. But I would definitely say, like, the mainstream medical community don't want to look at this. It's the same mantra of safe and effective. They're safe and effective. And there's actually no studies to prove that implants or any implanted medical device is safe and effective, especially on a long-term basis. So,
and they likely won't pay for very many studies to show that they are making people ill, which then they would be liable to answer to. So that's why it's important to do your own research and to trust your body when it tells you something's wrong and listen to it and go into it. So we're going to get into the episode shortly. Alexa has a very nice presentation she put together that is essentially a masterclass on the topic. The amount of research that she's done, and then actually going through it, picking what I believe is probably one of the top surgeons in all of Australia to do the surgery and the whole process. She's going to talk about all of it. But before we get into that, our show is self-funded by us, and our means of funding it is our business, Natural Art Form. So if you'd like to support the show and, on a monetary level, we have a discount code NaturalAF10 for our listeners that are holistic minded and want something to answer some of their own pain and inflammation issues, or just to replace products that they use every day, like deodorant. We have those on our website, naturalartform.com. And we run the business on 2 continents, in Australia, where we're at, and in the United States. And we have 2 different offerings. The same product, Alleviate, is on both continents. In Australia, because I'm here and I'm the tinkerer, I'm making the deodorants. I'm making a skin repair remedy that's on our website, and there's more to come. And then hopefully soon, early in the next year, we'll have all of that available in the US as well. So yeah, check that out.
And just to clarify, so that Natural AF 10 discount code will get you 10% off your first online order. But if you want to keep in the loop for any other discounts that we offer periodically, just join our mailing list. You can do that on the website as well. Yeah. We just ran our Black Friday sale. That was our last sale for the year, but come 2025, we'll always have new offerings. So you can sign up to the mailing list and make sure that you don't miss out on that too.
And also, we'd also greatly appreciate your help sharing the episode, getting this out there. If you or anyone you know is thinking about having breast implants removed, or God forbid, thinking about putting them in after hearing this, please share this episode to people. Tag them, tag us on Instagram, and write your comments and questions. We'd love to hear back about your experiences with this. And yeah, I would highly, highly recommend sending something like this to anyone thinking about getting breast implants, because this is a big part of the problem, is that we're not really given proper informed consent with the implanting of breast implants. Or it's really any medical device, which I'll touch on during the episode. But if I had this information given to me when I was deciding on whether to get them, I think it definitely would have made me think twice, where most of the information I got was from mainstream cosmetic surgeon sources, and they're just all like, it's fine. It's going to give you this look and it's going to look great and there's no problem and whatever. But had I known this stuff before, I'd like to think I wouldn't have got them. I maybe would have still, because I was quite stubborn in my early 20s. But yeah, definitely highly recommend sending this to anyone that you know that is considering getting them, because I think prevention is always better than cure. And of course, if you know anyone that has them and is extremely unwell, it's definitely worth looking into this stuff. So let's get into it. All right.
So to begin, we're going to start right back at the beginning and go into why I decided to get breast implants in the first place. So when I developed, by the time I was 16, I had like double D boobs. I developed, not super quickly, I would say, but definitely, was more busty than some of my friends in high school. And I was also like a little bit like, I was never like super overweight, but I would say I had like puppy fat. So, I was kind of like a little bit, like had a bit of chub. I mean, for someone to look at me, I was very average. I wasn't like chubby, but to me, I was like, I had a little bit of that puppy fat. And so when I got to around the age of like 17, 18, I started like going to the gym and working out for the first time. I lost maybe like 5 kilos, like not a huge amount of weight, but I lost weight and leaned up. And as a result of that, my boobs got a little bit smaller, but they were actually 2 different sizes, and they were very saggy. Like they were never super perky to begin with, but after the weight loss, they were quite saggy. I look back now and I'm probably like, they probably weren't even that bad. At that point in my life, I just really didn't like them. I used to actually say that like they didn't feel like mine, and I just never liked the look of them. And from very early on, I kind of had decided that I wanted to get them done. But I didn't end up getting them done until I was around 25. So throughout that time, there was a lot of, this is all in retrospect, but there was a lot of self-loathing. There was a lot of self-hatred underneath all of it. I never really, like, you know, guys used to say to me, why are you going to get breast implants? Guys don't even like that. And I was like, I don't care what guys like. Like, it's got nothing to do. I'm not doing this for guys. I'm doing it for me. So it wasn't like an insecurity around men or relationships or anything like that. It was just this like feeling inside myself that I wasn't good enough. and I didn't feel good in my body.
So no one made any comments negatively that were like stuck in your head and it was like an outside thing?
Yeah, no, never. It was 100% me. I take full responsibility. And I guess that's why I think it's important to share my story, because most of the women's stories that I've heard, doing a lot of this research, is most women got breast implants because they had small boobs to begin with. They were like flat chested.
Yeah, that's typically what
so to speak. Yeah. And so a lot of them, when they told their story, it was very much rooted in this insecurity of like not feeling womanly and like wanting bigger boobs and that kind of thing, where with me, it wasn't really that. Like I always kind of had boobs. I was always like tended to be more busty. But for me, it was more about like the sagginess and then the symmetry, because when I lost weight, like I literally had at one point I had like a C cup and a D cup, because women always naturally have one slightly bigger than the other. Sometimes it's a lot bigger than the other. So it was just that my bigger boob, I ended up with like 2 different cup sizes pretty much. So that's where it all began. So I had my surgery done in 2016. So I was 25 at the time. I ended up having my surgery actually done in Thailand. People always give me a funny look when I say that, because they just like Thailand.
It'd be like going to Mexico for us in America.
Yeah, yeah. Like you do hear kind of a horror story sometimes, but I had an amazing experience. I went through an Australian company. So they're one of those like cosmetic holiday travel company things. So I basically, what you do is you send them photos of what you want to have done, and they team you up with the best doctor for what you're having done. So they teamed me up with an amazing doctor. I was in a 4-star international hospital.
But just real quick, did you, at this point when you're looking to be paired up with the doctor, were you straight away going for an implant?
Yeah. So I'd already kind of had my mind made up. So when I emailed them, like when I got in touch with this company, I said to them, I want a breast lift with implants. So my quote unquote research was just online articles, most of them written by cosmetic surgeons. And because I was I was basically just looking at my options between a breast lift, like just getting implants, because just getting implants is a lot cheaper than doing a lift or a lift with implants.
Yeah.
So like in my early 20s, that was a big reason why I didn't get them done straight away. Was because of how much it was going to cost me. And the more research I did, the more I realized like I couldn't just have the implants put in. Like that wasn't really going to do much in the way of lifting them.
But why the implants? If you were already a double D, like why did you feel like you wanted that with it?
So in all the articles I read, they say that you get a better look when you do the implants, because they apparently remove like some of the breast tissue and then lift. And then so if you put the implant in, you get a much better overall look is what I read.
That helps me understand that a little better, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what it's kind of like. You can have a lift or, for an even better, it's like an upsell for them, it's just like,
premium breast
yeah. So I had my mind made up. I'm also a Taurus, guys, very stubborn. Like once I got my mind made up about something, that's it. So, yeah, they teamed me up with a doctor in Thailand. I also had my nose done at the same time. And I think it's important to touch on this, because one of the things I'm going to talk about towards the end is that these are the things like we really need to be looking at whenever we want to alter our body in any way, shape or form. Like why? What is the reason? And what are our influences? So my mum had her nose done in her 40s. And mind you, both my mum and I, like no one knows that we have them done unless we tell them. Like you can't tell. We both had it was very subtle. We didn't want to come out looking like Michael Jackson. We didn't really want people to be able to tell. And we had very minimal work done. It was really like, I can't really remember. I can't speak for my mum, but like for me, I just had the bridge shaved down a little, and just like the end, just it was same shape and everything, just smaller. That's what I said to him. I was like, I want the same shape, just smaller. So smaller bridge, smaller end. And it was just cheaper for me to do them at the same time. But my thought process at the time was, well, if my mum had hers done in her 40s, because your nose and your ears don't stop growing because they're cartilage. And I was like, well, if she had hers done in her 40s and I already like don't love my nose, I may as well just do it now instead of like having another surgery years later. So I had them both done, and the surgeon I had was amazing. I was in a 4-star international hospital. Like, my hospital room was better than my hotel room. We had like floor to ceiling glass windows overlooking the city. I had a full kitchenette with like a full-size fridge. I had my bed. I had a walk-in bath, like a huge bathroom. My mum was able to sleep in there because it was like a fold-out lounge thing.
And your surgeon spoke English.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes. None of the nurses.
First thing that pops into my head.
None of the nurses spoke English. I don't think in the whole hospital, but the surgeon definitely did. And he was very good. He was actually he was trained in microsurgery. So that was he's like started off in hand microsurgery, then got into cosmetics, and then they actually sent all of their breast lifts they would send to him because he's known as being a bit of a perfectionist. So he did a really good job. The pre-consultation process, apart from what you do with the company that sets you up with them, there isn't really one. Like, I arrived, and then I arrived at night. I spent one night at my hotel. The next day I went in to the hospital. I was admitted. I had my consult with him just to basically for him to go over what he was going to do, for me to ask any questions.
And you didn't go alone.
My mom came with me. Yeah. And you know what? Thank God, because at this point in my life, I didn't want to get married, didn't want to have kids. So I was not concerned with whether or not I could breastfeed. I had never even really thought of if I may lose sensation or anything like that. Thank God my mum was there, because she asked a lot of the questions that I don't think I ever would have asked at that point in time. And so he assured me that I would be able to breastfeed. It wouldn't be an issue. I just remember that it was just very much it's all fine. I think he warned, because they warn with any breast surgery that you can lose sensation, but it just depends on the person. He wasn't super concerned about it. And it was very, very short. He drew me up. I went back to my room, and then I just waited basically to go into theater. So it was quite a long surgery because I had both of them done. And again, he's quite a perfectionist.
The breast and the nose in the same surgical session.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. It was very long.
That's a pretty skilled doctor, though, I gotta say, because a lot I've heard of just kind of specialize either rhinoplasty, which is the nose, or the breast, which What is the technical special boy name of breast implant or breast surgery?
So it's breast augmentation. The lift is a mastopexy. So anyway, I came out. I was in hospital for a few days there. Came out, I was fine. And I'll bring up the presentation. So for anyone that's visual, jump on either Telegram, Rumble, or YouTube, where you can watch us. And you can see here. So I got what they call the gummy bear implant. So this is a silicone implant. So this is also important to know, because when I went in, I told him I wanted saline. And up until I started researching my implants when I got unwell, I thought I had saline implants this whole time. I'd never and they give you the booklet, like the product insert booklet thing, and I'd never looked at it. And I did not realize literally until this year that I had, not only did I have silicone, but I had this gummy bear type. So mostly you just hear saline. Silicone. The gummy bear, they're a newer implant. They were basically created so that they're literally the texture of a gummy bear. So if you push it, it's squishy like a gummy bear, and it doesn't actually have any liquid in it. So it reduces the risk of leakage, but it is all silicone. So
is there like a fluid inside of it, or is it just like a gummy bear would be, where it's the same gel
just
consistency?
all literally like a gummy bear. It's the same consistency, and then it just has a shell around it. Whereas the more traditional sort of silicone and saline, they have a shell that's then filled with either a silicone liquid or a saline liquid. And because they're filled with that liquid, there's a higher risk of rupture. And if they do rupture, that liquid inside is going to leak out. Whereas with a gummy bear implant, if it ruptures, it just doesn't leak out. However, the silicone can still leach into your body. So you can also have different surfaces. So there's smooth or textured. I had the textured. So the smooth, they're pretty self-explanatory. You can see here on the presentation what they look like. The smooth, they have a higher risk of flipping. So for anyone that's ever watched Botched, this is a lot of the stuff you'll see is like the ruptures. And I've seen some of those shows where you can just see them pulling like gunk out, like silicone that's ruptured.
So just a warning for our viewers or listeners, there are going to be described in this probably some things that may test your intestinal fortitude. So
I'll warn you before they come up. So for anyone that doesn't want to look.
It's not going to be super gory, but there some pictures of like blood and
at the end. Yeah. Okay. If you have a weak stomach, don't, but I'll warn you before they come up. But yeah, so for anyone that's watched Botch and you've seen how they, the implants flip, that's what can happen with a smooth surfaced implant because they're completely smooth. So they don't really have much grip around them. Whereas the textured, it's a bit rougher. It kind of sticks more to the tissue, the surrounding tissue, and it's less likely to flip. I had that. I had the textured gummy bear. I, again, didn't know this the whole time I had my implants in, but when I was researching, the textured implants do have a higher risk of a certain type of breast cancer that is associated with breast implants. It's in my product booklet. It will probably be in any breast implant product booklet that is a potential side effect, that they have associated this particular type of breast cancer to implants, especially if you have the textured surface implants. So then there's different placements of the implants. So I had mine under the muscle. Again, this has become a lot more popular over probably the last 15 to 20 years because they give you more of a natural look, and that's what the doctors usually recommend. Like he said to me, we'll do it under the muscle. You get more of a natural look, whereas when you place them over the muscle, that's more of like the Pam Anderson, like bolt-on look. They look very fake because it's literally just the implant sitting on top, and that's really all you see. So mine were placed under the muscle, and again in the presentation you can just see the different placements. And then this is the scarring I ended up with. So I was under the impression that I would have an anchor scar, which is so cut around the nipple, down, and then underneath. For anyone watching, you can see the difference here in the image. I actually just ended up with a lollipop scar. So it was just around the nipple, down, and then like a bit of a keyhole underneath.
So they title these things like lollipop, gummy bear, like whipped cream topping. Like, they make it sound very like fun and tasty. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I just noticed that.
All right. So that pretty much covers why I got them, what I had done.
Yeah.
So then fast forward so I had my implants in for almost 8 years. It actually wasn't until you and I met that it even came across my radar that breast implant illness was a thing. And I do also want to preface this, guys, with the term breast implant illness. It's kind of like a syndrome. It's not like a disease. It's not, how do I explain it? Like, don't get too attached to the term. I'm not attached to the term at all, but it's just an explanation of basically what's going on. It's basically just your breast implants are making you sick.
Yeah. And there's a whole spectrum of symptoms that you get into.
Yeah. So I was not aware of this at all. The only thing that kind of came into my periphery, like maybe like a year before I met you, was that I had found research to show that there's a higher risk of complications with breastfeeding in women that have breast implants.
Yeah, understandable.
And especially with the lift, because they're cutting around the nipple. So I remember finding that out, and I was really kind of disheartened because I know I have extended family members who had the exact same surgery that I did and had trouble breastfeeding their kids. So that kind of stuck with me, but I didn't really look much further than that. And then when I met you, and I think, like I mentioned in the intro, like, I had kind of come to the decision where I was like, I'm definitely not going to replace them when it's time. I just want to take them out. And I think I'd said to you, like, if I have problems breastfeeding, then I'll look into just taking them out early. And then you sent me Alex Zech's podcast on breast implant illness.
I didn't even listen to the whole thing. I think I heard it and saw that it was the title and just was like, yep, that's for Lex. So that was the first time that even came into my awareness, and I listened to it and I was like, wow, it just made so much sense because, I have a background in holistic nutrition and like looking at the body, and I'm like, yeah, of course, like these foreign objects, they're full of like all these really toxic chemicals that they don't tell you about. I'm like, yeah, of course, it makes so much sense.
Still didn't really think much of it because at that point in time, I was feeling great. Like I remember at that point in time, I had taken up Muay Thai boxing and I was like walking every day and I was intermittent fasting at the time. I was feeling great. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to just like, shelve that and know that if I start to get really unwell, these symptoms start to show up, I'll definitely look into it.
And the reason I sent it to her was, so she had talked about her implants before. This is before we physically met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I was in the States. She was over here. You can hear our episode on how we met, episode 11, I think.
Yeah.
So Alexa was mentioning her hair falling out. And now she's just so annoying having all this stuff fall out. I had heard some of that on some of the same complaints from whoever. I didn't remember who Alec was interviewing in that episode.
It was Amanda Porter and Robin Tout.
Okay.
So, actually, we'll put the links in this episode. We'll put the link to that podcast because I highly recommend people listen to it. It was a great episode. And you can then find them on Instagram and they share a lot of information there. Yeah.
But I just remember that jumping out and I was like, oh, I wonder if that could be correlated.
So, so like I said, at that point in time, I thought I was fine. It wasn't until I got really unwell that I looked back and I did actually have symptoms, very sporadic symptoms that I hadn't connected. And they'd been happening for quite a while. But it actually wasn't until, so then again, fast forwarding like months later, when Isaac and I traveled to the States and we did Mexico and the States for about 5 weeks. And then we came back to Australia and I kind of my health just kind of declined. It was on this steady decline for about 6 months. And even then I didn't really realize what was going on because, you make so many excuses. And this is the other thing for a lot of women. We tend to just make excuses for why we're feeling like shit. And we tend to put ourselves second. So especially for women that are mothers and wives and, they've got kids to raise and a household to run, it's like, I'm really busy. I'm just busy. Of course, that's why I'm feeling so fatigued. There's just, I think we make a lot of excuses and it's so insidious, I would say, because it kind of just creeps up on you. Like for me, it was this like very slow, like it was like one thing and another. And then it was like, you just get more and more used to this, like this level of feeling like shit, but you just constantly like just going down, down, down. And
what is it like feeling zapped, low energy?
Yeah. Well,
pains.
And after the trip, like it was such a big trip and traveling, we had the best time, but like coming home, I was kind of like, yeah, of course I'm going to feel really fatigued and really I just need to get back home and back into my routine. And, I'd put on a bit of weight as you do when you're traveling, especially in the States. And I look back now.
Why? What's wrong with a giant plate of nachos?
Not that I ate that, just for the record. But it was actually while we were traveling. When we flew into Colorado, it's very high altitude and I have always lived on the east coast of Australia. I've always lived close to the water. The furthest I've ever lived from the coast is maybe like an hour away. So flying into Colorado and then spending a week in Wyoming, which was like 7,000 feet above sea level, that was like a shock to my system. And it was actually when we flew into Colorado on the plane, I've heard my implant squelch. And I was like, what was that?
What's a squelch?
It's so hard to explain. It's like, have you ever heard like a joint kind of rub? It kind of makes a like it's so hard to explain what the sound it made, because it was like I kind of heard the sound through my body, if that makes sense. It wasn't like a really loud external sound, and that's the only way I can describe it. Or if you were to hear like a joint creak underwater, it was kind of like that but more squishy. It's so hard to explain. So that happened for the first time on the plane, and then we got to Wyoming and it was happening all the time.
Yeah.
And I did freak out, and then jumped online and I was like, breast implant squelching. I just searched.
You can imagine. So Denver is like the Mile High City, 5,280 feet is the elevation there. Driving, so we rented a camper van and drove from Denver north to Cheyenne. It's like an hour and a half. In that hour and a half, you go up a little over another 1,000 foot, and then from there to my parents' place, which is like another 500 foot or whatever, 800 foot. And in that time, if you have a water bottle in Denver and you open it, take a drink and close it, when you drive by the time you get to my parents' house, the water bottle is inflated like a balloon because the air is expanding the higher up in altitude you go.
Yeah.
So you can kind of imagine that's going on inside. If there's any air bubble at all or any kind of
well, there's a cavity. I mean, there's an implant somewhere it shouldn't be. So there's a cavity of some sort. So yeah, freaked out, looked online. I literally just searched breast implant squelching and it said that it can happen if there's a complication or if you're at high altitude. So I was like, okay, that makes me feel better. Apparently this is normal at high altitude. Didn't think anything of it. We drove to California. The time we spent in California was fine. Stopped, never happened again. Then I got back and then I just my health gradually declined. So it really wasn't until I think around February, March, when I started a fitness program. And again, because I eat pretty well, if I do any if I started, an exercise routine or whatever, weight just drops off me. I've always been like that. And started this exercise, a workout thing. And I did it very for a month straight. I followed it I was doing all the workouts. I was tracking my diet, everything. And over that month, I lost maybe a kilo and a half. And that's so unlike me. And I was just what the hell? I'm doing everything. And I'm just not losing weight. So then I started thinking, because I've got a family history of thyroid problems. So I was maybe it's hypothyroidism. And I'm just that can be one of the symptoms. And I was kind of feeling that's right around that time too. I noticed when I was putting my shoes on, my shoes felt tight, my feet were swollen. So I started looking into hypothyroidism and I went to get blood tests. And Isaac then said again, are you sure it's not your breast implants? And I was like, huh. So then I just dove in. I was just head first and I just started researching. I started listening
I didn't see her for 2 days.
literally. Guys, can I just say the process of doing the research and realizing what was going on, it was I'm laughing because thinking back, it was one of those, it was a dark night of the soul. Let's just say that. It was for probably 2 weeks. Hey. Straight, where I was researching and Isaac would come up sometimes and I'd be sitting reading through all these women's stories and I'd just turn around and start crying and saying this is it. This is I can't believe I've done this to myself. And it was just a whole thing. Cause I really, at that point when I started doing the research, I had to then reflect on why I got them in the first place. And then I had to be really real with myself. And that's when, like I mentioned before, I realized it was a lot of self-hatred. It was a lot of self-loathing. That was the core of it, and wanting to change myself because I didn't feel good enough and my body didn't feel good enough. So it was intense. So as I started doing the research, I then pulled together all my symptoms because then I realized I was having symptoms from a while before the trip. And then, but obviously I got a ton more after the trip. So I'll just go through them. I've got this on the presentation, but you don't really need to watch this. It's just for me to track. So prior to the overseas trip, I had hair loss. Hair loss was the one that I had for probably the longest. That started in around 2022. And it was when I moved out of Sydney up to the Northern Rivers. And that's people would say to me, oh, it's just stress, hair loss. It's just stress. And I was like, I've literally moved into a rainforest and I'm the least stressed I've ever been. It didn't make sense. So that was kind of one thing. Then early last year, so probably around the time I met you, so early 2023, I started getting joint pain. So joint pain in my hips, both hips, my knees. And because I was doing yoga, when I say I was doing yoga every day, it was 15, 20 minutes a day. And then I was doing Muay Thai and stuff. So I'd asked a couple of people and they're just oh, maybe you're just doing too much yoga and, all the kicking but even then I was it's just weird because I'm fairly young. I'm not, I'm not old and I'm not diseased. So I'm not it was just weird. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And also just if I'd sat in a position for too long, when I'd get up, my joints would be felt almost locked. They'd be so sore to get them moving again. I had I didn't realize until I looked back at the prior year and a half, my menstrual cycle had gotten really irregular. So I used to be pretty much every 30 days. Pretty much like clockwork. And then the most I'd ever be out is 1, maybe 2 days at most. When I looked back at the prior year, my cycle had been anywhere from 27 to 32 days. Every month was like completely different. There was just no telling. I also had GI symptoms. So this also started around the time of the joint pain. Roughly, I thought it was to do with the supplement I was taking. So basically what was happening was I was going to the toilet and it was like trying to pass a rock. Like it was so painful and then I would bleed. And I'd never, ever had any issues like that in my life prior to that. So I stopped the supplement. It stopped. It wasn't as bad, but then it would just recur. Like every month or so, I'd get this same thing where like I couldn't pass a stool. It would bleed. I'd be sore for days and then it would heal. And then I'd just go through that whole cycle again. And that happened for about a year. And then cellulite. So I've always had like dimples, little dimples here and there on my legs. But again, over the last like probably 2 years, maybe, it started to get worse. And then, it actually at its worst, it got to a point where I was starting to get like cellulite on my arms and this patch of my belly, like below my breasts. And I'll explain why that happened in a minute. So they were the ones that kind of lasted the longest. And that's why they were so sporadic. I didn't put them all together. Like I didn't think that they were all being caused by the same thing. So they kind of just went on and I didn't really know. I was kind of just trying to treat each symptom. I just didn't really know what was going on. After the overseas trip, however, I had extreme fatigue, most days I just couldn't get through the day without lying down and taking a nap. Brain fog, like really struggling to concentrate on things. Headaches, I would get constant headaches and I'd never was like a headache for me most of my life is like once in a blue moon. And I can usually pinpoint, I'm usually either like dehydrated or I'm just tired. Like I know this was just constant, like almost every day I'd get a headache at some point in the day. General edema, so that swelling, my feet, like my shoes felt tight, like my body just looked swollen. So when I was doing the workout routine, that's what I was working out all the time. And I didn't look like I was losing weight. I just looked swollen all the time. The inability to lose weight, muscle weakness. So again, not just with working out, but just in general, like I just always felt very weak. Like I didn't have a lot of strength in my body. Chest pain. So I was getting, especially, do you remember when I was doing the research? So when I was like, for this like 2-week period where I was just researching, listening to women's stories, and listening to podcasts and reading things. And, I kept getting like really severe chest pains, like sharp chest pains. And I think at that point in time, it was just because of the awareness was coming to what was going. It was like my body telling me like, yes,
confirmed.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was like ding, 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 ding. But even prior to that, I would get just, again, very sporadic, sharp chest pain sometimes. Shortness of breath. So where we live on our property is like up a hill a little bit, literally. And I'm just explaining my symptoms too, because again, for people that are just like, oh, shortness of breath, oh, I'm just unfit, because that was the excuse I made. But I literally could not get up the top of my hill without being puffed out. And that's what I used to say, God, I'm unfit. And I'm just like, now I'm just like, no, that's not normal. Like to walk, maybe 20 meters up a hill, I shouldn't be puffed out. But that was definitely that was one of my symptoms. So the shortness of breath.
Yeah. And that's for people in America. That doesn't mean that she went to a Diddy party. That just means she was exhausted. Like she was puffed out. So.
I had dull skin, so just no color in my especially in my face. I was getting vertigo and dizzy spells increasingly. So again, I've always had a tendency towards vertigo and stuff. But over the months, it was like it would just come out of nowhere, and it would just keep happening like randomly.
Yeah, there was one time it was pretty severe. You were like, lay down for quite a bit.
Yeah, because when it gets bad, I can't focus my eyes, and then it starts to make you feel really sick. So I was getting bouts of that. Low libido, inability to fall pregnant. So on 2 occasions, so there was one occasion that I felt very strongly that I was pregnant. It wasn't confirmed, but I literally woke up in the middle of the night one night and threw up, which is very unlike me. I hate throwing up. Anyone that knows me knows I freaking hate throwing up. And I literally got up after I threw up, and I said to Isaac, I think I might be pregnant. I think I got my period late, but I did get my period. But it didn't feel like a normal period. It felt like I'd passed something. And then a few weeks before my surgery, I had a pregnancy test it had a very faint positive line. different experience because I freaked out because I was like, I've just booked my surgery. What am I going to do? And whatever. And again, like got my period late. But then I realized, I was like, that's probably because it does affect your hormones. I think we were falling pregnant, but it wasn't sticking. So that was definitely a pattern. And then depression, apathy, malaise, and disconnection from life. So the disconnection from life, I've got to say, was the one thing. It was the worst thing, but I could not put my finger on it until after. And I realized, because I actually listened to a podcast where a woman was telling her story, and she actually said something about, your implants are literally blocking your heart chakra. And I'd never actually thought about it from that perspective up until that point about the energy. And I was like, oh, yeah, she's right. And then we watched that documentary by the Heart Math Institute. I can't remember the name of it. I wish I could, because I highly recommend people watch it. And it's basically about what the heart really is. Like, it's not just a pump as we're told in mainstream medicine.
It's not a pump at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to watch the video to find out why.
Well, and they talk a lot, they do, the Heart Math Institute does a lot of research into like energy and like sort of this quantum look at science and the energy field of the heart. And I realized that that's kind of what was happening. There was a very much a blockage of energy. And when you're disconnected from your heart, you are disconnected from life, because that's how we feel into life. We feel into other people. We feel into our environment. And that's what it felt like. And mind you, mine is just like, even my surgeon said to me, like, thank God you caught yours early. Because some of the women she sees in a lot of the stories I listen to are women that have been sick for like 10, 15, 20 years sometimes. And they get to a point where they're so unwell, they just want to die. Like, they don't care. At that point, they don't care if they have no boobs. They just like, I've heard many times from women telling their stories that they were just ready to die on the table and they didn't care because they were so unwell.
So severe. Is that because it's like a chronic fatigue type thing, or?
Yeah, it's just, I guess, well, because that's what I was going to say, like this disconnection from life that I felt, and this like, I put in there depression. Like, I wouldn't have said at the time I felt depressed, but I definitely had days that I did feel really depressed. It wasn't like ongoing. But the disconnection from life, like, and I mean, you can speak to this too, because you experienced before and after, but it was affecting every part of my life. It was affecting our relationship. Like, we were bickering and arguing a lot. Like, I was, you were wanting help with the business and I just couldn't. Like, I had nothing to give because I was so exhausted all the time. Like, I couldn't even get through the day just with like the normal things I had to do. Like, and when I say normal things, like just like cooking our meals and like, doing washing and tidying up around the house and just doing, the other work that I do, with the AVN and whatever. Like, I could barely get through that. So the thought of like helping you with the business and like doing anything else, I couldn't. And I felt very isolated because I couldn't really ever explain exactly how I was feeling either. But it was affecting my work too, because I felt like it was so hard to work. It was so hard because like I just had so much brain fog and like it was so difficult to concentrate and just like this lack of energy. So it was affecting like all these different aspects of my life. So for anyone watching the presentation, I'm just going to show, these are the consistently reported symptoms. And I've referenced the source here because you can look them up, and they actually give you a checklist of the symptoms. So for anyone that thinks it may be breast implant illness that they're suffering from, you can actually just like print off this list and you can just check box what applies to you. I'm not going to go through them all, but there are a ton. Fatigue, brain fog, memory loss, cognition problems, muscle pain or weakness, joint pain, hair loss and dry hair, premature aging of skin, inflammation, weight problems, insomnia and poor sleep, bloodshot eyes, declining vision, thyroid problems, adrenal fatigue, low libido, slow healing and easy bruising, slow recovery after exercise. So that is actually one of the symptoms. Vertigo, headaches, migraines, throat clearing, cough, difficulty swallowing, reflux, nausea, gastritis, irritable bowel syndrome, fevers, night sweats, heat intolerance, UTIs, yeast infections, tinnitus, metallic taste, sudden new food intolerances and allergies, heart palpitations and like heart symptoms, blood pressure problems, chest discomfort and shortness of breath, And then there's like a whole other page.
Yeah, it just
so
keeps going.
Yeah. So if anyone looking,
It sounds so feeling like you're dying. Depression, anxiety.
Well, that's how a
attacks,
lot of people feel, unfortunately. It's like,
it can get pretty severe.
Yeah. So, and again, I would say this is like the longer it goes on, undiagnosed and the longer the implants are in the body, really. So it can be a very, very wide range of symptoms. So that's why I think that's really important to know, that it can be a huge range of symptoms, and every woman is going to be different, because, yeah.
It's really critical. Like, I haven't seen this list like this, but I notice there's a lot of autoimmune illnesses that are co-diagnosed or diagnosed maybe prior to them looking at the breast implants.
Yeah.
And I imagine you'll go into why.
Yeah. So yes, that's again very important to note, because a lot of women are, and this is the reason that they get really unwell, is that they go to multiple doctors in some cases and different specialists and stuff, and they get misdiagnosed with autoimmune conditions, and thyroid conditions are the most popular two. And they're just like, well, that's what's wrong with you. But then it just never, ever, I mean, usually in the mainstream medical system, they're just giving you medications and stuff. So it doesn't really like cure anything anyway. But most of the women I've listened to, like almost all of them, all of their symptoms went away after they removed their breast implants. However, the caveat to that is if you already had a pre-existing autoimmune condition or thyroid condition, taking your breast implants won't necessarily make that go away. So what is breast implant illness, and what's going on in the body with the breast implants in there? So there are a few ways in which they make you ill. I want to say here too that it doesn't require a rupture to make you sick. So I think a very common misconception is that you only get sick if your breast implants rupture and you've got like silicone leakages and stuff. That can happen, and that will probably make you sicker faster, which in some ways can be a blessing in disguise because you'll catch it more quickly. But that does not have to happen for you to get really unwell. In my case, I had no ruptures. I thought I did, because after our trip where like my implants were squelching and stuff, I was like, oh my God, what if they've ruptured? And then that's why I thought I had gotten so sick, like in such a short amount of time. But I had no ruptures and I was still really unwell. So there's two main ways in which they make you really unwell. So again, on the presentation, I've just got a picture of sort of the anatomy. So you have a lot of lymph that runs through the breast and chest area, especially for women because we breastfeed, but even for men. And of course, you've got your musculature, you've got your breast tissue, milk ducts, and all of that. And then you've got the rib cage and chest wall. So just to start with the lymphatic system. So these images here show how much lymph we have running through that chest area, and then how it connects to all the other lymph running through the body. So especially like into the face and the arms. So what happens is when you've got the breast implants in there, you're basically blocking all of that lymph flow because you've got something there that shouldn't be there. So you're going to have like this thing that's kind of pushing on all the surrounding things. So for me, in my case, this is why I noticed. So one, the general edema, you just get like general swelling is very common. And then two was the places I started to get cellulite, like this cellulite looking skin was literally on my arms here. Like you have to see where I'm pointing, but like sort of just near my underarm, like where that little flabby bit is. It was like dimply, and then like the patch, like the middle of my stomach at the top, like right under my breast, was like dimply and cellulite looking. And I never had that before. And again, for someone quite young that's like not super overweight or anything, I didn't understand what that was. Now I'm just like, yeah, 100%. It was like that blockage of lymph flow. It's pretty well known that is a contributor to cellulite. And I also know that because I used to work in the beauty industry doing non-surgical body shaping treatments. And that's what we were taught with cellulite. That part of it is like a blockage of lymphatic movement. So that's just one part of it. The other part is that your body, with any foreign object put into your body's going to want to protect yourself from whatever it is that's in there. So it forms a capsule around the breast implant. Now, this happens with all breast implants, and this is one of the things that they do not explain to you when you get breast implants, and it's well known. So your body forms a capsule it's actually scar tissue around the implant. So I don't know how long it takes to form. I think it might take years, but essentially, and this is why I would say, and a lot of women that have been through this would say, and actually my surgeon says this too, it's not a matter of whether you'll get sick from your implants, it's a matter of when. So, and that's why you tend to see the longer that women have them in, the sicker they'll get. And once they're sick, it'll just continue to get worse and worse and worse the longer they keep them in. So your body forms this capsule of scar tissue around. And basically what that signals to your body is that you've got a foreign object in there. There's something wrong. We've put scar tissue around. So the scar tissue is highly inflammatory, and it's constantly sending signals to your immune system saying that something's wrong. So one of the things that my surgeon is now researching, and what some doctors are now looking at the association with, is having breast implants and the symptoms that are caused with what's called Mast Cell Activation Syndrome. So again, like, for me personally, talking about this, I don't really attach too much to the labels of things. And I'm at the point now where I'm like, we don't even really know what the immune system is. But in a very general term, it makes a lot of sense that you've got a foreign object in your body, and your body is going to constantly be signaling that something's wrong. We need to get this out. And again, the longer that you have them in, the more disruption it's going to cause. So the Mast Cell Activation Syndrome, it's MCAS for short, is also associated with very high levels of histamine, because that's one of the effects of when the mast cells get activated. They then trigger histamine to go and sort of clean things up and whatever. So it's like this ongoing sort of cascade of immune responses. And that's why a lot of people end up getting misdiagnosed with autoimmune diseases, because they think that that's what's going on, but it's actually just the implants being in there is just constantly sending this signal to your immune system that something's wrong. We need to get it out.
Yeah. And you said something critical, like we won't get into it fully in this episode, but not understanding the immune system, or if it even is what they say as an immune system. But whatever it is, like there is like the lymphatics, we don't get taught that much in like trauma medicine when I was in the Army. They mention it, they kind of explain what it's for, but don't really go into it. And looking back now, I have a sneaking suspicion that's because they don't fully understand it. Or if you did understand it, you would realize that there's a lot of holes in the current medical model. But these ducts and these things that are flowing, this flow of this fluid, what we're finding out now is could be something called fourth phase water, and there's an electrical impulse to it. There's a current, and energetically, if that's blocked energetically, that is what's tied to a lot of things that have been deemed autoimmune or disease or whatever else. It's like something wrong with the energy that's going on there, or a block or a trauma to it.
Yeah. And this is the problem too with mainstream medicine, is that they're never looking at you holistically. Because if they were, they would be piecing together all of the symptoms and looking at why it's happening. Whereas like I've listened to some women's stories where they were seeing like an endocrinologist for their thyroid, and then seeing like someone else for their autoimmune conditions. And it was like all this stuff, but it was literally just her breast implants that were making her sick and causing all of these symptoms.
Yeah.
So,
it seems like that would be obvious. It seems like the first thing you go through a diagnostics. All right, let's look at your medical history. What surgeries have you had? Have you had anything implanted into your body? But doesn't seem that there's a lot of understanding about how the body reacts to a foreign object being like permanently placed inside of it.
Yeah, and there are some natural health practitioners that have, like, there's one lady I listened to, like she went through the same thing and had her breast implants removed, and I think she's a naturopath or something, and so she now has it on her intake form. So yeah, it's like it's starting to get looked at, and there are lots of doctors out there that are now explanting. Like there are some doctors now that specialize in that. and they don't do implanting anymore, and they know the dangers, and so they're able to look at that. But like most mainstream medical doctors and surgeons just won't look at it. And I actually did, when I was doing my research, I actually came across some podcasts, and they're like debunking breast implant illness. And basically saying how, like it's just rubbish and whatever. It's just like what they do with most. It's like, it's exactly the same story. It's the same MO as vaccines. They're safe and effective. They don't want to look at it. And there are actually no safety studies on vaccines. And it's the same thing. Like most of the studies done on breast implants are done by the manufacturers. There's a clear conflict of interest there. If the only people studying them are the manufacturers, because they're always going to be skewed in their results. Yeah. So there's a big gap there with not just breast implants, but with a lot of medical devices that are implanted.
Yeah, and these studies are very expensive. And to do these studies, they need funding. And who has the funding that typically goes into these studies? It's a lot of these pharmaceutical industry, or they call it biotech. The biotech companies themselves fund the studies. And if there's, I'm sure there's a big multi-billion-dollar, maybe trillion-dollar industry of breast implants. They don't want that disrupted.
Absolutely.
It's not in their self-interest. So
yeah, exactly. And they do. These like most surgeons, I mean, that's their biggest moneymaker. It's like, oh, we'll pop them in. Let's just pop them in. And then every 10 to 15 years, you've got to replace them. It's like they guaranteed repeat customers.
And I don't even want to put it all on the surgeons, because they're trained in these clinics and schools that are funded by the biotech industry. Yeah. So the biotech industry is what decides what goes into their curriculum, and that's a moneyed interest, and that's obviously coloring how they think, because they've been shown one perspective.
One thing that I actually forgot to touch on earlier, which is another reason that they can make you really ill, is just some of the ingredients that are in breast implants. So this is regardless of whether you have silicone, saline filling, gummy bear, they all have a silicone shell. So even if you have saline implants, they still have a silicone shell around them. And I'm just going to read out some of the ingredients, which, by the way, when I was doing my research, the ingredients are so hard to find. And again, this is what they do. You see this time and time again in the medical industry. When you try and get information on what is in these products, it can be very difficult. And it was so hard to find. And then even some of the product information sheets that I found, because they're all like these synthetic chemicals, it's like M1 and then like a word that's like 25 letters long and you can't even read and you don't even know what it is. So I actually heard this on a podcast. So some of the ingredients in the silicone shell are metal cleaning acid, printing ink, epoxy resin, lacquer thinner, epoxy hardener, heavy metals including platinum and aluminium. So can I just say too, so my implants were Mentor, that's the brand, and they actually on their website there are no studies to show that platinum is dangerous or harmful or whatever. And the studies that they're based on are, I would say, not credible studies. So there is no, like my question to that is, well, what is the safe limit of platinum? There are no studies to show what a safe limit of platinum in the body is. So, and they do say that platinum is included in, so especially in my, particularly my implants, that platinum is included in the ingredients. Rubber solvent, phenols, benzenes, ethylene oxide. So a lot of people heard about ethylene oxide during COVID because they were in the nasal test swabs that they were like basically shoving up to people's brains, highly toxic. Talcum powder, formaldehyde.
Talcum powder is a known carcinogen. Mm-hmm. It's now pulled off the shelves. If you've ever put like baby powder, if you try to go find Johnson & Johnson baby powder now, can't find it.
Yeah.
Off the shelf, talcum powder, now proven to be carcinogenic.
Yeah. So formaldehyde, ethyl acetate, dichloromethane, PVC, and acetone. So that's just a small list. I don't think that's an exhaustive list.
What's the safe limit of acetone in the body?
Yeah, it's just like, this is why it's kind of, it's kind of infuriating that, you know, medical companies, pharmaceutical companies, because that's really, they're all intertwined. This is the stuff that they're making and putting into people's bodies, and they're just like, yeah, it's safe and effective. Like, how on earth could you ever say that anything that contains all that stuff is safe and effective to be put in someone's body. So I just wanted to touch on that too, because that's also like just knowing the toxic chemicals that are in these products as well, that alone just being in your body is enough to trigger an immune response and cause a lot of these symptoms.
Wow. If you were to mix that and eat that, people would think that you're trying to commit suicide. But you mix that and you put it into an implant and you stamp a medical certification on it and then implant it into people. Nobody bats an eye, which is no bueno.
Yeah. So I did all my research, had a very dark night of the soul, went a little bit mad for a few weeks. And I finally decided, I was like, I knew I had to take them out, especially when I felt very strongly that it was affecting my fertility. That's when I was like, I have to get these out now. So I actually, one of the very first podcasts I listened to was the surgeon that I ended up choosing. And it was so divinely guided, because this is maybe the second or third podcast I listened to. I'll link the podcast in the show notes, because I've actually sent it to quite a few people, especially. Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, especially women that have reached out and asked for more info. I always send them her podcast because it's just so informative. And her surname is actually my uncle, who's now passed, is his Egyptian name. So there was like a little bit of a sync there. I was just like, oh, that's like very unusual name. And I was like, okay. So anyway, just listening, thinking it's going to be some doctor from the States. Anyway, it turns out she's a doctor. She's a surgeon from Sydney. And anyway, I heard her, and I had a very strong instinct too that I really wanted a female surgeon this time. I don't know why, but there was just something about, being a woman and, breasts being part of the female anatomy. I just really felt very strongly that I wanted a female surgeon. So I listened to her podcast and I was like, I'm sold. I'm going to her. I'm going to go have a consultation. Now, I also did book another consultation. I inquired with another surgeon up on the Gold Coast, and they just didn't get back to my inquiry. So to me, that was, again, felt very divinely guided, where not only did my surgeon get back to me, but they actually squeezed me in when I was going down for a Sydney trip, like in the next whatever month or so. And they actually went out of their way to squeeze me in. So,
and at this point, did you already know, like, have an inkling of how you would pay for it, or how we would pay for it? Or was this still like just figuring out how much it would cost and what would be involved?
Well, part of the research I did, so I joined a Facebook group. It's huge. It's got almost 200,000 members from all over the world. And I had read looked up some Australian women on there, and they had said that they had pulled out their super. So in Australia, we have superannuation. I don't know what you guys call it in the States.
It's kind of like a mandatory 401k plan.
Yeah, like a retirement fund thing, whatever that you get. Yeah. So, so I knew that I could pull out my super, which at this point in time was the only way that I could pay for it. I had no idea how much the total was going to cost me. But I didn't actually know the process or anything until I consulted. So I ended up only consulting with my surgeon. However, I do recommend to people definitely consult with multiple doctors and then make your choice. Because I am a very firm believer, especially now with my view of medicine and the medical industry. It's very important, if you are going to be in that system, you have to be with someone that is going to respect your decisions and that knows what they're doing. There's not one of these like just blindly following what the rest of the medical industry is doing. So so I consulted with my surgeon. She did a full assessment of me. And so this is where I started to also find out like what was actually going on. So again, I'll show this in the presentation. So she found that I had capsular contracture. So capsular contracture is basically where the capsule that's formed around the implant, over time, it contracts around and it gets tighter and tighter around the implant. And basically what happens on like externally is you feel the breast implant gets very, very hard and it can be quite painful. There's different grades here. So in the image, there's grade 1 through 4, 4 being the worst. Mine, I actually don't know, but I think mine was probably around grade 2, or it could have been grade 3. So breast is hardened, implant is palpable and visible. That's grade 3. That was probably mine actually, because And I just want to say too, so because mine was under the muscle, mine were high profile implants, which means that they're quite round and sit up. So mine were under the muscle. And for anyone watching, it was literally like up, like it would sit up here. So I can't really explain, but it was like quite high up on my chest. And then I had like my breast tissue was like lower. Then I had this, what they call the waterfall effect. So it's when over time, and this tends to happen, is very common with breast lifts with implants, is that over time, the breast implant stays where it is, but the breast tissue waterfalls over the breast implant. So it's no longer sitting in front. And then you still end up with saggy boobs. Now, mind you, they still weren't as like saggy as they once were, but they had definitely dropped. And the more that the breast tissue dropped below, the more pronounced the implant looked, and which I didn't really like. And in a lot of my clothes and stuff, like they would kind of, be popping out. So I had the waterfall effect, and then also what they call animation or animation deformity. So animation is basically where, just to explain it, because I've got a very short video in the presentation for anyone watching, but for anyone listening, the animation deformity is when you tense your chest muscles and your whole breast moves when you tense your chest muscles, which shouldn't happen. So I'll just quickly play the video for anyone watching, just so they can see what it looks like. So she's tensing putting her arms together, holding her hands together and tensing, and you can see her whole breast lifts when she tenses her chest muscle. So I also had that. So that was what she found at my assessment. And so what also happens, which I didn't mention earlier, but so what happens is when the capsule around the breast implants forms, once it's formed, it then attaches to all of the surrounding tissue. Anyway, I went in for my surgery, and afterwards she actually said to me, "Were you getting a lot of chest pain?" And I was like, yeah, in the end, I was getting a lot of chest pain. And she said, your capsule was attached to like everything. So just a few centimeters below my collarbone, that's where my capsule had attached to. So it was attached there, it was attached to my rib cage, it was attached to my chest wall, it was attached everywhere. So the more attached to it is to the surrounding tissue, the more pain you get, because when you move, it's pulling on all these different spots. So my surgical process was taking them both out. So to get them put in is, in my case, it was quite a few hours because I had 2 surgeries in one. But for women that aren't doing a lift, they're just having the breast implants put in. It's like a one and done. To have them taken out, it's a much more complex process. And this is why it is so, so very important that you choose a surgeon that knows exactly what they're doing. Not only are they aware of breast implant illness, but they know the correct procedure to explant.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you were just like, I'm getting them out, and you just skip the podcast, this is where you actually want to stop and listen to this part. This is actually the most critical part of the whole presentation, in my opinion.
Yeah. So what they do, they call it an on-block capsulectomy or an on-block breast implant removal, because they have to take the implant out with the capsule in its entirety. It's so important after your surgery for your surgeon to show you photos of the breast implant with the capsule intact when they've taken it out, front and back. Because if you're to take, and this is actually what they do in replacements, they just take the implant out and put another one in. They don't remove the capsule. They don't do anything with it. And in that case, they're putting an implant back in. So it's probably just still going to make you sick eventually anyway. But if you're to remove the implant without the capsule and just leave the capsule in, or if you don't remove all of the capsule and it's in pieces and it's still attached places, you can then still get sick after, even without the implants in, because again, the capsule being in there is still signaling to your body that we've got scar tissue in here and something's wrong, and it can still be triggering immune responses. So in some cases, women can stay sick or even get more unwell even though they've had the implants removed. So this is why this is so crucial, because I couldn't think of anything worse, going through that whole process and then realizing that it wasn't done properly and you're still sick and you've probably got to have another surgery. So, so the en bloc, taking it out in totality, that's what en bloc means, is very, very important. So, and that's, I don't even know the full process, but I can only imagine what she was doing. Cause like I said, she said the capsule in me was attached at so many places. They've kind of got to be very careful in unattaching all those areas and then pulling it out. Then I had a muscle repair because I had my implants put in under the muscle. It actually, of course, it changes the anatomy. So they put the muscle back in its anatomical position. A lot of surgeons that are explanting don't do this. So again, this is really important, especially if you've had it put under the muscle, which a lot of women do now. Then I had a what they call a flap reconstruction. So my surgeon is actually she started in oncology. She's an oncologist. She started in just breast surgery, so that she was doing breast surgery and reconstruction.
And that's around cancer, for people that aren't familiar with the term.
Yeah. So when I first listened to the podcast, one of the things that really resonated with me was that she's actually, she's not really for full mastectomy, which a lot of oncologists are just like, yeah, we'll just take it all out. She's actually all about conserving as much breast tissue as possible and then reconstructing with what you've got. So that really resonated for me because I was like, okay, she seems like she's, at least wanting to like keep as much natural tissue there as possible. So with a flap reconstruction, basically they take a section of tissue from directly underneath the breast. So that's like fat, skin, and I think a little bit of muscle. I'm not 100% sure. And they basically just cut it out and flip it sort of up and into the breast tissue area to give you more volume, basically. Well, and this is one of the things that she says, and I think, again, listening to her, I was like, yeah, no wonder I felt called to go with a female surgeon, was that being a female, she knows how important it is for women to feel like they're in a very womanly body. And for a lot of women, the reason they got implants was because they were flat-chested and didn't feel very womanly. So she's very skilled in reconstruction and making a woman feel as natural as possible. And in my case, she actually said to me, you've got really good breast tissue. Like, you actually never needed implants. You just needed a good lift. And God, I wish I'd met her 10 years ago because that's, and look, even if I still had them done at that point in time, I would have felt much better about just having a lift. However,
do you really need a lift though?
If I knew, that's the thing, if I knew everything I know now back then, I never would have touched them. I never would have touched them. I would have done the inner work. I would have looked at the reasons I wanted them, and I would have worked on loving my body more.
And they probably would have perked up on their own.
Probably. Yeah, well, that's, now the stuff I know about breast massage and how important that is. And there's like, woulda, shoulda, coulda. But anyway, so that was the process. I ended up with an anchor scar in the end. So that's what I have now. So she basically had to do the same thing when they reconstruct. It's basically the same process as the lift, in the sense that they cut around the nipple, they have to reposition it, and then they stitch that back up, stitch down. And then I've got a full anchor scar that goes all the way around and under my breast. And I've got to say, she did an amazing job, like amazing. I look in the mirror all the time and I'm just like, wow, they look amazing, like beautiful. Like, you can't draw more perfect boobs. Like, she's amazing. Can't recommend her highly enough. And the people I actually came across, the women I came across in the support group that had also seen her, said the same thing. Can't recommend her highly enough. Does an amazing job. And one of the most important things for me was during the whole process of, I had to get blood tests and MRI and all this stuff. With the MRI, it said that I needed a contrast dye, and I didn't really want that. And I actually asked her, I said, look, if I wasn't to get the contrast dye, how much are you going to see? And she said, look, without the contrast dye, we'll probably see about 60% of what we need to see. If you get the contrast dye, we see all of it. But it's totally up to you. She said, I can't make you do anything that you don't want to do. And so it's totally up to you what you want to do. So that was huge for me, because as someone who really doesn't participate very much in the medical system at all anymore, it's very important for me to see doctors that are going to, one, give me informed consent. That's very important with a lot of things, because in a lot of the medical products that we use and pharmaceutical products, we don't get proper informed consent. And two, that are going to give me autonomy over my body. Not that anyone gives that to you, but they're going to respect my decisions that I make for my body.
Yeah. Well, and good on you for just putting your feet down and just being like, I'm not doing the contrast dye. Would you have been fine without it, or with getting the contrast dye? I don't know, but I'm sure it's probably, relatively safe compared to all the other stuff that people inject, but it's your body, and you get to, at the end of the day, have the choice and say, I don't want that injected into me. And she was obviously capable enough to do a phenomenal job without it.
Yeah, exactly. So also the surgical process, the surgery is always about 8 hours. Mine ended up being about 6.5, but it is a very long surgery because, as I described, there's a lot that they have to do, and obviously done very carefully. So it is a long surgery, and the recovery is quite a lot. So I was just overnight in the hospital. Coming out, I had drains put in. So this is very normal with explant surgery, because essentially they're taking these implants out and you've got cavities in your chest. So you have to have drains in so that all the fluid's coming out and there's less chance of infection. So I had my drains in for about a week. So you basically have them in until you get, less than 10 mils or 20 mils a day or something.
20 mils of what? Like what was
fluid. So whatever's coming out. So
just
it's kind
interstitial
of
fluid, which is like a mixture of like blood plasma, a little bit of blood in there.
Yeah.
And
Isaac,
fourth phase water.
Isaac likes the science.
You could probably drink it and get like a homeopathic.
Oh, gross. Oh, no, I would never. Anyway.
I've actually put in those types of drains before. They can actually go into the chest cavity.
Yeah.
And that's what we would use them
for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they come and they're actually stitched in, which I didn't know until I got them out. I was like, holy dooly. And getting them out after a week, oh my God. Oh, that was just like the best feeling. It was just like each step was like a step closer to like, I can just be normal again, because there's a lot that you can't do. So you can't shower. So that was the other thing, because I went down to Sydney to have it done. I had to stay there for 2 weeks because they want you near the hospital, near the surgeon, so that if God forbid anything happens, you're there and they can attend to you straight away. So we stayed with a very dear friend of ours who I'm so grateful for the first week and a half, because she was like very close to the hospital I went to. And I couldn't shower. Thank God where we stayed, she had one of those handheld shower heads. So my mum would come in with me and basically hose me down, because especially when I have my drains in, you're like carrying them around in bags. It's like a whole thing.
Yeah, you needed like 2 people to help you, because you had to change the bandages.
I couldn't dress, like you can't lift your arms above your head for 6 weeks.
You can't reach.
Yeah, couldn't reach out. Can't stretch your arms out.
T-Rex arms.
Yeah, I was told to use T-Rex arms only. I was getting in trouble off everyone because I was trying to do things like, stop it. No heavy lifting, no household chores, like nothing. And that's very hard for someone like me. As much as I was like, I'm just going to relax and do nothing. I think I did that for the first couple of weeks. But when I came home, it was so hard not to do stuff.
Yeah. And I was actually a bit nervous because Alexa's a really good cook. And I was thinking, well, I'm going to have to step up. I'm ready. I can step up and cook. I can cook. But can I really cook?
Yeah, I didn't let him do much. I think.
But we had Lex's mom with us and our friend there, and they did the cooking and
so blessed, so grateful. Like I can't stress enough how important it is to have support during this time too, because it's a very big thing to go through. It was a really big surgery. It's a big recovery, and when it's something like your breasts, every time I do this, I'm like, I'm not going to cry. But when it's like a part of you that like makes you a woman, it is very sensitive. It's, and like for me, like having to go reflect back on why I got them in the first place, and like this amount of like self-hatred and self-loathing I had towards myself, there was such a deep sense of regret afterwards, and feeling like I'd done something that I could never, ever, ever take back. So that's why the surgery was
such a big thing because it was the only thing I could do to rectify what I'd done. And really, I was just doing further damage to my body. And that's really, really hard. It took me like that during the recovery process. There was lots of emotions and lots of ups and downs where I would feel really good and then, feel really bad again. And, I still don't have full feeling in my breast, so around my nipple, which obviously she told me that's a risk with any breast surgery, even like your first breast surgery that can happen. But I was very lucky with my first one that I got full sensation back. I never had any issues with that. But now I still to this day don't have like full sensation around my nipple, so the nipple and then a little bit around the nipple and then around the scars. I have been doing a scar treatment with another dear friend of ours who's a Bowen therapist, but she does a specific scar treatment, and that has been amazing. So I've been seeing her for I think the last couple of months now, and after every session I've done with her, I actually get more and more feeling around the scar. So this is the scar that runs underneath and around my breast. So that's been amazing. I'm getting the sensation back more and more. And and I guess I've got to work more with, I've done a bit of Psych K, but just because for anyone that knows Joe Dispenza's story, he literally healed himself in a hospital bed, by using his mind and actually envisioning his back being healed and everything coming back into where it's meant to be. And I do believe that we have that capacity as human beings and we are very powerful. So, for me, I think it's more of that work. And I've often I'll envision, my nerves all coming back and, my milk ducts that, I'm not going to have an issue with breastfeeding. I mean, that's another thing. I won't know until I have kids whether I'm going to be able to breastfeed or not. And that's really hard too, just not knowing. But I just don't get too caught up on that. I don't get caught up around the story of I might not be able to breastfeed and whatever, because I do have full faith that there's every possibility that I can and that it's very possible. But I do also have to be very real with the possibility that I may not, and it may this may have caused issues as well.
Yeah. So it's definitely, it's not something to take lightly, but at the end of the day, it's, your health is improving, and you can get into whenever you want to go into that about how you feel afterwards and the changes that you've noticed. But it's been hard for you. Not so much for me. It's not, I'm here trying to be supportive as much as I can, but a lot of this stuff because you're just such a solid, as soon as you possibly could, you were already back to cooking and cleaning and stuff. And you just have this need to do things. And so I think a lot of the more emotional stuff, the stuff that I can't see or that I don't, experience and all that. So after the body's healed up and you feel, outside, it looks like, she's on the mend, she's good. But inside, especially losing sensation to a part of your body it creates a barrier between you and yourself. This little patch of you feels gone, feels disconnected. And energetically, I think it's so amazing that we have a friend here that does the Bowen therapy and the scar treatments, because scars, they affect the energy flow and everything on your body as well. And the only way to address it, there's a couple things you can do, but the energy needs to be addressed, and consciousness can attend to that. So
absolutely. Yeah. And so I've got to say, there were lots of things I did. So in terms of my post-surgery, recovery, so I'll share everything I did, because again, for people that are sort of running our circles, they're more aligned to natural health and holistic health and doing things as naturally as possible. So I was on pain medication for
trigger warning. If you have any kind of medical background, this is going to upset you.
I can vouch for that. So I was on pain medication. Also, another interesting point, because I don't think all surgeons do this, but my surgeon, so before I went in for my surgery, they actually do, and because apparently this is very normal in in oncology and when they're doing reconstructive surgery, is that they actually
they use local anesthetic to the chest area so that when you come out of surgery, you don't need as much pain medication. So this was actually the first surgery I've ever had, and I've had quite a few. This is my only like cosmetic surgery though, my breast and my nose, but I've had quite a few surgeries. This was the only surgery I came out of, like a long surgery that
I've had a few surgeries. I wouldn't say quite a few.
Oh, for someone my age, I've had all 4 of my wisdom teeth removed at like 17, I think I was. Then I had an abscess removed. Oh no, so then I had my cosmetic surgery. Then I had an abscess removed, which was like a 2-pronged surgical thing. So I had like one, and then like 3 months later I had another one or whatever. And then I had this one. So for someone that's like in their early 30s, it's quite a lot of surgeries. But anyway, yeah, this was the only like long surgery I'd ever come out of where I didn't throw up. Which is normally that's from all the anesthesia and the pain medication.
The opiates.
Yeah. So, so that was great. So also recommend asking if your surgeon does that, and if not, whether it's a possibility. So I was on pain medication coming out. I was also prescribed, I was on a anti-inflammatory thing as well. And then I was prescribed antibiotics. I chose not to take the antibiotics. I literally came out and I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to take them. And I was like kind of free. He's like, no, like you're just being silly now. Like you just came out of surgery. You got to do this and that and whatever. And I was like, I'm not taking them. I was like, I took homeopathics, and I was like, I'm going to take the homeopathics for that prevent infection, or for infection. And I just completely trusted that.
I'm just seeing like you're opened up. Their doctors are in there, got their foot on the table and they're trying to yank out the capsule and they're breathing, and they got the paper masks on. And those of you that know, the paper masks don't do shit for like particles coming out of your mouth. If you cough or you breathe, it's blowing it right through the paper, right into the chest cavity. And I'm just thinking like, oh my God, whatever is going to go on in there. Like if there's any kind of like thing that's going to fester and turn into a infection, that's going to have permanent consequences on the look of the breast and the scar. And it could be very like,
yeah, he was like, he freaked out.
Imagining the worst.
Yeah, for about a day.
I know how dirty hospitals are. I know people that have had Willie Wagtail over there. I know people who've gotten like massive staph infections from hospitals, and
yeah, because Isaac's been on the other side. Like he's worked in hospitals and stuff, so I get it. But I was just like, look, I trust my body. I really don't like antibiotics. I haven't taken antibiotics for about almost 10 years now, I'd say.
Nice.
Yeah, not into them. And yeah, I mean, we've always used homeopathy, so I know that it works and I fully trust it.
Yeah,
so
I'm proud of you for sticking to your guns.
Yeah.
And your mom was definitely backing you up.
Yeah.
She was in your corner.
He had no chance against me and Mom.
No, I'm proud of you for doing that, because that shifted my perspective massively. And now I mean, once I actually paused and thought about what would you do if you didn't have, because we were trained to think like this too in the Army, or at least in special operations medicine, where if you didn't have access to antibiotics, how would you treat it?
Yeah.
And you would, like, I would use things like honey. I would, colloidal silver is a powerful one.
Yeah, which is what we also use. So we were, because I had to put on some ointment just on the nipple for like a few days after, maybe 4 days after. So we were using that, but then when I stopped using that, we used Manuka honey. We were using colloidal silver to like clean the wounds. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was taking homeopathics. I didn't take the antibiotics.
Which homeopathics though?
Oh, I can't remember. Arnica and calendula.
I remember those two. Arnica, calendula.
I think there was another one I took at some point, but yeah, I can't fully remember. But the anti-inflammatory I was on, it was a pain and anti-inflammatory thing mixed together. About a week after my surgery, I started getting like really bad ulcers in my mouth. Like the whole roof of my mouth was ulcerated. The back of my throat kind of like I could barely eat. It was so painful to eat. And then I was looking up the side effects of the drugs I was taking, and it was this anti-inflammatory one. So that was prescribed to me for like 10 days, I think, but I think I only took it for a week, because as soon as I realized that was what was causing that side effect, I just stopped taking it. Again, I just trusted my body. And I kind of felt too, I was like, if this is a side effect I'm having, I probably don't need it. I mean, after my first surgery, like getting the implants in,
the fact that I was off pain meds and pretty much off my meds like a week after, I was like, I knew I've always recovered pretty well from surgery. So I was just like, I just trusted my body. I was just like, I don't need it. So I just kind of made my own decisions like that. It's just like, you know your body better than anyone else. Like you're the only person that can make the right decisions for your body. And I just went with that.
Yeah. And there are studies that, and I used honey years ago. My uncle told me about that. I got into a bar fight once, and I had a big carpet burn on my forehead, and I put honey on it. It's like in my early 20s. My uncle told me that he's a honey connoisseur in North Carolina, but he told me to put honey on it. It healed in like a day. It was like already almost the scab had fallen off. Or maybe 2 days. But I'm not exaggerating. Like that was quick. But there's studies that show that honey, and especially Manuka honey, which comes from New Zealand, right? Mm-hmm. That it will actually heal much faster than if you use anything else, like Neosporin, bacitracin, all the antibiotic ointments. It'll actually accelerate the healing of a wound. And there's actual studies on that. So, and it's safe to use, and it keeps totally protected from infection.
Yeah. So we use that. And then there was a lot. I mean, the colloidal silver. And I was taking the colloidal silver internally as well, and spraying it on the wound from time to time.
And we'd spray it on the dressings as well, because that's in a surgical environment. As soon as you open the dressing, supposedly air has bacteria and all this stuff, and it gets on it, and
which is all bullshit. But anyway, we were doing that, and again, same as my first surgery, I had to wear a compression bra, a post-surgical bra for 6 weeks straight. So it kind of gets a bit uncomfortable at times, and like for the first 2 weeks, she put like foam blocks here because that just helps with the shape so that they don't kind of fall down. And so she's like very amazing. That's why they look so great. So that was super uncomfortable. I could only sleep on my back for 6 weeks, which for me was really hard because I'm a stomach sleeper. So it's very uncomfortable. Like I couldn't shower properly, I think, until I got home. So after the first 2 weeks was when I could shower properly, when all the dressings came off. When I got home too, that was when I would sit out in the sun and just like, I would take the bra off, but just kind of leave it on me and just sit out in the sun for as long as I could. And then obviously put the bra back on because I did have to wear it 24/7. So I was getting like natural sun. So I was trying to do as much natural stuff as possible. And then a big part of it, I was actually speaking to my body, and I was just telling it like how grateful I am, like thanking it. There was a lot of sorries because, it was very confronting to see them after and just see what had been done again, and to have another massive surgery and then like have all these scars. It's very, very confronting. But I just, in the mirror, I just spoke to my body and touched it and just gave it a lot of gratitude and told my breasts that I love them and I love my body. And I've also done a lot of Psych K around this since then. I did balances. Actually, I did balances throughout the whole process because at one point I was really scared about going into the surgery, and it was really, I guess, because I was feeling so much regret about doing it in the first place and whatever. So I balanced that. And then afterwards, I've done a lot of stuff around self-love. And I have a completely different relationship with my body now. It's been a really challenging road. And I think, I wouldn't wish this upon anybody. I really wouldn't. It's such a tough thing to go through. However, I do fully accept that this just had to be my journey for me to get to where I am now and to fully love and accept my body. I think that's been one of the best things that's come out of it. And again, there might be challenges that come up when I have kids. I won't know what will happen when I breastfeed. Some really good news we got at that 3-month checkup was that, so I was told that I couldn't fall pregnant for 6 months following my surgery. And after my 3-month checkup, she was so happy with how I was healing that she was like, you can start trying for a baby now. So I was like, yay. So that was super exciting. Yeah. But I really won't know if I'll be able to breastfeed until I have kids and try and breastfeed. So we'll have to definitely do an update on that.
Yeah. I have a good feeling about it. And, I'm not putting on the Meet the Fockers boob. I'm not doing that. So I'm telling your boobs right now. You're going to be fine. You're going to be able to handle it.
So now, guys, just quickly, this is time for the gory stuff. So for anyone that doesn't want to look at this, if you're watching this, don't look now. But these are the photos of my implants after they came out. And I've kind of left this to the end for a reason, which I'll get to. So as you can see, they're very red, very inflamed. Like the left one, looking very angry, very inflamed and red. The right one, so this is the front. The back, the right one, you can see it's almost, I think it was starting to calcify. So that's like where it's kind of yellowish. And even my surgeon said that. She said this one was like harder, and it was definitely, and you see some of them have calcified to the point that it's like dry, like flaky stuff, like dust coming off it. It's, yeah, pretty gnarly. So this is them cut open, and you can see there's like a fluid on the implant, and they actually sent that off for testing because they test if there's any silicone in that fluid and whether it did actually leach out at all into the capsule.
Have they gotten the results back from those tests?
Yeah. It came back negative for silicone, but there was something in the notes about like a protein-like substance or something that she said, even though it tested negative for silicone, she said, I wouldn't be surprised if there is actually silicone in there. So that's them cut open. Now,
maybe they should do a PCR test on it and find some silicone.
So this is with the capsule off. And the right capsule, when we first saw these photos, I didn't get these photos until I think my 3-month checkup. No, I think she'd shown me them. That's right. She'd shown me them at my 2-week checkup before I went home. And then I didn't get the photos until like months later. And when I actually looked through the photos myself, I was like, oh my God, this looks like a face in the capsule, like a demonic face. And it blew my mind because at this time, this was when I was doing Rachel Vaughan's psychic development course, and we just had her on.
Yeah. I'll zoom in on this when I do the post-production so people can see.
Yeah. So we had spoken about just the way that, you know, these demonic entities can attach, how they can play out. I've had my own experiences with having clearings and stuff. And I saw this and straight away I was like, oh my God, this is something that was like, this thought was like implanted. And again, this is my understanding of this stuff is that for these entities to attach to you, there has to be a foothold. So for example, in my case, it was like, I had this self-loathing, like not feeling good enough. Well, I would say the self-loathing is probably what's perpetuated by these entities, but the not feeling good enough, that's their foothold in. They're like, she doesn't feel good enough, we can use this. And they come in and I'm telling you, this thought was implanted because once I decided that I was getting breast implants, no one could tell me otherwise. My mum really didn't want me to get them. And bless her heart for coming with me to Thailand to support me because she didn't even want me getting them. And I still, there was no changing my mind. And I saw this and I actually asked Rachel, I said, do you think that this was something that was like attached to me and part of this? And she actually said, yes. She said there are demons specifically for self-mutilation, which I would 100% consider this because then there's like an offshoot of cosmetic surgery, which is like body modification. I don't know if anyone's seen that. It's
shit.
100%. It is sick. Yeah. So I 100% this is a part of that because it is. It's like you are mutilating your body. I know that's a really harsh term to use, but you are mutilating your body by putting something in there that doesn't belong there to make yourself look a certain way. And yeah, so very interesting. So from an energetic and spiritual perspective, I do 100% believe that this was a type of psychic attack or spiritual attack. And unfortunately, at this point in time, there was no way that I had any awareness of that stuff and didn't know that this was anything other than my own decision. So yeah, just something to take note of again for anyone that is considering getting them. Please look at the root reason. Like, what is the core of why you're wanting to do this? And just ask, is that really something that I want to do? Or is this coming from an insecurity or a lack or like whatever it may be coming from? Like, look at that first. If I could go back and just do the inner work to like love and accept my body and not have gone through all of this over 10 years, I wish I could rewind time and do that, but unfortunately I can't. And that's why I do feel that it's so important for me to share my story. And another thing that I want to mention too is that another thing that I learned with Rachel, and I think we actually discussed this on our episode with her last week, was that when you're starting to upgrade, when your soul is raising its frequency and you're starting to upgrade the soul levels, your body, it will not be able to tolerate toxins as much anymore. So you won't be able to drink, you won't be able to eat shitty food, you won't be able to be in toxic environments. And when I realized that and what that actually is, like that whole upgrading thing and your body detoxing, I really do believe also that the reason I got so sick so quickly when I did was because I needed to upgrade. And I have since getting them out. And Isaac can vouch for this because he lives with me. Like the difference is like night and day, especially because of how sick I was and how fatigued and like, you know, every day just felt like a struggle. What we've achieved, I feel, in just the last few months since I've done my surgery has surpassed everything like the year prior to that. And
are you talking like what, personally, business,
everything? I think everything. Our relationship has improved. The business has improved because after my surgery, I was actually able to come on and like really be on board and help you with the business. And it has, it's just grown like month on month. It just keeps growing. We started the podcast. You know, it's just so much has opened up for me. And I really do believe it's this spiritual aspect. Like I needed to upgrade and I don't think I was able to do that with these things in my body.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of makes sense, especially when you consider that blocking the heart chakra, because that's one of the most important points of emanation from this stuff. When you move forward in your life with your heart, yeah, it's I think the most powerful part of the energy cycle. I mean, there's parts that hold, you know, like fear and the spleen and different things, but the heart overcomes all of that. The heart will kind of attenuate your whole field, your whole frequency. Yeah. And yeah, you're doing great, kid.
Yeah. And just another point too, which I just find interesting, because again, just from this this spiritual point of view and with entities and stuff, of all the people that I told about getting sick from my implants and having my implants removed and going through the explant surgery, there was only one person in my life who's no longer in my life, but there was one person in my life that said that I should keep them in. Now, that to me is a very clear indicator that that person has entities attached to them and potentially running them, because why on earth would you say to someone to keep the implants in if they're making you sick?
Yeah.
You know,
and not to listen or honor someone else's instinct and decision and what they feel is right, but to be like, no, the thing that's potentially making you sick and keeping you from advancing, because these entities do know that. They know. Yeah. And I think they kind of give each other little assists here and there where they're like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't go, don't heal.
Yeah.
Don't move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the only person in my life, you know, this is coming from someone who had no experience with it, had never researched it, but was like, no, I don't think you should get them out. And when we'd had that conversation, but then when I ended up getting sick and deciding to have them out, it was said again to someone very close to me. And that's a very clear indication. So, you know, that's what I love sharing my story, because it's very different to a lot of the other stories you hear, because I do bring in like the spirituality aspect of it. There's so much to that as well, which even that unfolded for me, you know, even after I had them out, a lot of it unfolded afterwards. And it gave me a much better picture of what was actually going on all levels, physically, emotionally, mentally and spiritually, definitely. And arguably the spiritual aspect is the most important, I feel. So yeah.
They say the thought precedes the act, the thought precedes actual physical matter, but I believe that there's spirit even above and beyond the thought. So the spiritual realm it's worth looking into and learning about.
Well, and just knowing that these entities can mess with your thoughts. They can implant thoughts. They can heighten or exaggerate certain thoughts that you're having.
And they have influence.
Yeah.
It's not that the entity made you do anything, but they implant the thought. They foster this sense of whatever it is, doom, fear, self-loathing, whatever. It's
and
insidious.
This one person that said that I should keep them in also didn't ask me one question about my surgery, didn't ask how I was recovering after my surgery. Like, it's very clear. It's when you start to see these patterns, guys, you can definitely see when entities are at play. And I just think it's a very, very important lesson because it happens a lot more often than we think, and to people that you would not expect that it's happening to. So I just want to emphasize that point as well. It's been very interesting for me to experience that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to point out too that there is love at some level for that person, but it's also, just a clear signal of where they're at. And that's, we wish them well on their journey, and hopefully that clears up for them. But
yeah. So I want to finish off with this before and after photo. The photo on the left was me before. This was around the time that I was starting to get really unwell. And as you can see, actually an interesting, I use this photo too, because this was when I first started working out, and I'm thinking I feel really great, which I didn't really, but I was feeling good in the sense that I was working out again and whatever, even though it was such a struggle. But as you can see, you can just see how much bigger my chest was, and again, quite swollen, quite puffy. You can see where the implants are kind of sitting up very high. You can see a little bit of my arm, which is kind of cellulite and dimply, and just very swollen. I wish I could have got a full body photo in. But then on the right, this was just a couple of months after my surgery, actually, this photo. And that's with no makeup on. I had color in my face again. My hair, this was the first time in a long time that it was actually starting to grow and not falling out a ton.
It was longer here too than it had been in a while.
Yes, that was actually the longest it had been in a long time, because it was so constantly falling out and just really dead and really gross. I just had to keep cutting it short because the ends would get really yuck. So this is the longest it had been in a long time at this point. I actually just said the other day, my hair is the healthiest it's been in years, years and years and years. I just love that photo. I was just so happy. It was just very genuine. And I think I hadn't felt like that for so long. That photo to me just represents me now.
Yeah.
Barefaced and bare bummed, ready to take on the world.
Bare bummed.
You haven't heard that one?
No.
You're just another bare bum in the shower.
Just
don't ever think you're that great because you're just another bare bum in the shower.
Just going pantsless into battle. That's all I got from it. Just running out the door with your helmet and your sword, but no pants.
Anyway, so that's my journey, guys. A little bit long-winded. I like to get into all the details, but I do think it's important. And people are going to receive this differently. So whatever's important to you, I hope that you got that out of that. And I did this presentation on the Living Free movement a few months ago now, and I actually had lots of people reach out and thank me for doing the presentation and sharing my journey. One lady actually said, I think she's had her implants in for about 16 years, and she's kind of had this thing in the back of her mind saying that she needs to, get them out, and she feels like she's ready to take the first step. And I've had other people come into my path since then that I've shared my story with, and they've kind of said the same thing. So yeah, it's really beautiful to be able to support people in that. And I always tell people, so for anyone watching this, if you have any questions, if you just need support, if you're not sure what to do, please feel free to reach out to me. You can do that through our socials. On our socials, I think it's in the bio. You'll find my personal Instagram. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm always willing to answer questions and help point you in the right direction of information. We will look in the show notes, because we'll post some of the podcasts that I've listened to and that I share with people, and some information. I'll also post the source of that symptoms list. That's a really great website for resources, and that website also has a list of surgeons around the world. So wherever you are, you can actually look up that and see if there's a surgeon in your area. There's actually a ton in Australia, and you can also join through that website. I think they've got the Facebook support group, which is the one that I joined. So I can point you in the direction of all those. But yeah, if you ever have any deeper questions or just want to share where you're at, please reach out to me by all means.
Yeah, and I love that you bring in the spiritual aspect of it, the the physical thing, taking the full explant, the capsule and everything else, but also going at the thought form that was there at the beginning and addressing that and coming back to a place of real, true holistic healing, physically, mentally, spiritually. And we wish the same for you. So if you're going through this, if you are sick and are thinking of having implants taken out, or you have some other form of, something along those lines of, just not really loving your body fully and all that, I hope this episode helped. And absolutely reach out to any one of us about resources. We have tons of ideas. If you have any questions about ways to address the emotional side, the mental side, about loving yourself and feeling comfortable in your own skin. We don't know all the answers, but what we've used for our own lives to help address some of our own emotional issues.
And we've got Steve, our friend Steve and Leah, coming on to talk about emotion code. I actually did an emotion code session as well around this. I've used Psych K. I've done some other energetic healing practices with some other people. I've been doing the Bowen therapy scar treatment. Yeah, there's no one way. Everyone's different, so you got to do what works for you. But there are lots of things that you can do outside of the medical system for this stuff as well, especially in the healing process. So just for full disclosure for anyone looking into this, because it does not come cheap. So I was able to pull out my super. I spent almost $30,000. All up. So that was for my hospital stay, all my medications, the surgeon's fee, what else? Yeah, all like the anesthesiologist, like all of that. Yeah. But it is possible to pull your super out for people in Australia. I'm not sure about in the States, but it's a pretty easy process. And for me, it was worth it. There was no question about it.
Yeah. And that's Australian dollars. So in US dollars, it's a bit different. Yeah. And our medical system over there operates a bit differently, so it's probably like $1 billion to get an I don't know.
No, I think a lot of the women I saw from the States on the support group, I think, obviously depending on where you are and what surgeon you see, but anywhere from around, I think I saw some for around $12,500 up to around 20. So I guess it just depends on where you are and who you see, but
and
it's a
the
little bit
extent
less.
of the surgery that you need.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, it is stinking hot here, so we're going to go for a swim now. And we'll catch you on the next episode.
Yes.
Bye, guys.
Bye.